I always thought I was mentally tough. Like I took pride in that. But we have a guy on today that is going to have a lot of good stories on mental toughness and how to persevere, overcoming adversity, and all that. Phillip Koontz is on with us today, former Navy SEAL who is now a worldwide keynote speaker, published author, executive business coach. And Phillip, man, the author of Truth Behind My Trident, Overcoming Life and Business Obstacles the Navy SEAL Way. And more importantly, Phil, you swam at the University of Toledo. So
Yeah, let's go Rockets. I did, man. Long time ago.
Thanks for coming on, brother. I know we texted a little bit about Big Ben and the Miami, Ohio Redhawks, but I'm going to own you as a Toledo guy.
I know I'm kind of divided, right? I swam for 2 years at UT and then I transferred to Miami. So I'm like, but yeah, man, I mean, if I had to pick between you and me, I'm a little bit more of a Rocket, right? Because that runs in my blood. So,
well, and it depends who you're talking to. Big Ben hits you up. It's like, hey man, let's go. I'm Miami of Ohio all the way.
I'm a Rocket for the next 45 minutes, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I'm fired up, man. You do a great job with your book, but also just your leadership, your empowerment in the community. A lot of people, not just in football or in your world, but day to day have to deal with the ups and downs and challenges of life. So I can't wait to dive into your story.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, Bruce. It's good to be here, brother.
Well, let's get going. Hey, I'm Bruce Gradkowski, founder of the Alpha 5 Method. We're going to be talking to some of my friends, former NFL players, other high achievers, entrepreneurs, people that have beat cancer. Those are the kind of people you're going to be hearing from on the Alpha 5 Method podcast. I mean, so many different places we can start, like from being in the Navy SEALs to chaplain and all that. But I appreciate you coming on and spending the time.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Thanks. And I mean, dude, just kick it off, man. I'll start anywhere and everywhere, and we'll just kind of go down whatever rabbit holes we go down.
Well, I was going to say, what made you, because you wrote the book, The Truth Behind My Trident, what motivated you to write a book?
Yeah, so I had just gotten done getting my master's in leadership out here in Colorado, which is where I live. I live in Monument, Colorado right now. And the whole public speaking thing kind of fell on my lap. My dad actually was my first client. So he calls me up like, hey, I'm going to fly you out to Cincinnati, which is where I was born and raised. So I like the Patriots, right? But Bengals, I mean, that's where I'm at. So, yeah, born and raised in Cincinnati. So he's like, hey, I'm going to fly you out, do a client appreciation event. And I'm like, hey, if you're going to pay me, I'll come out. Right. So that was kind of the organic start to my career as a public speaker. And of course, as a public speaker, it's always nice to have a book, kind of builds credibility. I had just gotten done, with my master's program. So I'm like, man, I don't want to write anymore because I got done writing a ton. But I was like, yeah, this is something that's definitely needed. And so Bruce, I basically wrote the book that I wish I would have read before going into SEAL training. And, it wouldn't have discouraged me from going in. It just would have helped me to go in with eyes wider open, as I say, with just some expectations of like, okay, this is a little bit more of a snapshot of what naval special warfare looks like and a lot of the soft communities that are out there. So yeah, wrote the book I wish I would have read. And I really wrote it for the candidates that are going in, those guys that want to become SEALs. But then I'm like, okay, that's a very small niche of people, right? There's a very small demographic. So then I also related it then to men and women business who are in corporate America in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and really wanted to make it practical. So I talk about my go bag. What are some of the tools that I had in my go bag? What are some tools that the general public has in their go bag to really help them overcome adversity, to really help them be prepared in life?
That's so good. And we'll get into all that. And I want to bounce back though. Like, you're at Toledo, you're a swimmer on the swim team. Like, when did you know you wanted to become a Navy SEAL? Like, when was that kind of thought process going through your mind?
Yeah, that's good. So I kind of grew up, obviously knowing who the SEALs were. I loved weapons and stuff and making weapons. I was that kid, that would go out in the woods for the whole day. Back when the United States used to be safe, right? When you just go out and,
Oh,
and, and and disappear for a while, right? Come back for dinner at night. But I was just a little different, growing up, and I knew that. And so I was recruited. I was on scholarship to swim for UT. I was a freestyler and a backstroker, so 100, 200 back were my specialties, and 100 free. And I was there, and I had been swimming since I was 12 years old competitively, and so I was there swimming, and I was like, you know what? I realize I'm like not Michael Phelps. I realize that like I just don't have the genetics to really get to that next level of the Olympics. I made it pretty far, but mostly just with a lot of grit and hard work. So I was like, you know what? I want to really focus on my school. So that's when I transferred a little bit closer back to home in Cincinnati there. So I transferred to Miami University. After I got my degree in marketing, I was in corporate America for a little while. And I'll tell you, Bruce, I mean, no offense to the listeners who are in corporate America, like God bless you, like that is awesome, but it just wasn't for me, man. Have you ever seen the movie Office Space?
yeah.
You know, like that was me, dude, stuck in a cubicle, like with my TPS reports. I wore a suit and a tie every day, and I'm like, no one's looking at me, right? Like, why am I dressed like this? So it was the politics, it was just the corporate America atmosphere. I'm like, this is not for me, man. So because of my swimming background, I'm like, the military makes sense. And I actually went over to the Army side first. I mentioned this in my book, the Army side first. And they're like, well, you have to be in the infantry for a couple of years before you go through the Q course, before you go try out to be a Green Beret. And I was a cocky college grad. I was 23 years old at the time. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I went over literally across the hall to the Navy side, and they said, hey, you can come right in. And as a matter of fact, we'll give you $8,000 because you actually have your college degree, and you can, you can go right into the pipeline through BUDS, which is our SEAL training. And so for me, $8,000, hanging in front of my face, I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. And then with my swimming background, of course, too, that was definitely a very, very helpful with that familiarity of the water and just the lack of oxygen, that we have with some of our evolutions that we have to go through in SEAL training, definitely helped give me that comfortability under the water. So the swimming, along with just kind of how I'm made, my bent, it just made a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And then you make that decision. You see they're throwing 8 grand. You're like, heck yeah, like this is for me. But
Eight,
then
eight,
how
eight
long?
grand for a 23-year-old is a lot of money, man. Right? I
Heck
mean,
yeah.
if you're not playing in the NFL, right? Like, 8 grand for most 23-year-olds is a lot of money. So yeah.
Well, people ask me now. They're like, man, just think if you still played at Toledo with the NIL deals. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, at Toledo, I don't think I would have made like what these big colleges, quarterbacks are making. But I'm like, shoot, an extra $500,000 a month. That's huge in college. I don't know if
Oh,
my bank account was ever above like $50.
I know, right? Yeah, you throw that kind of money, it's life changing.
So when you make that decision though, like how long do you have to prepare before you go to Bud's training? Like, what's the process?
Yeah, so I mean, every guy's different. I would say probably 80% of guys really don't know how to prepare well.
Mm.
And so for me, and again, I mentioned this in my book, I was very fortunate. So I shipped out of the Northeast. So I was in corporate America up in Connecticut, in the Wilton, Connecticut area. So I shipped out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. And while I was there, I actually met a guy who became pretty good friends of mine. He was an elite athlete. He ran Ironmans. And so I was awesome at swimming. He was awesome at running. And so I'm like, hey, you seem to be really disciplined and to really like, know what you want, and you're very prepared. So I'm like, let's link up together. So I moved down to Clearwater, Florida with him. And we trained for several months before we both ended up shipping out. So helped him with his swimming. He helped me with running. But I mean, we came up with our own regiment, which is honestly still what I use today with the candidates that I'm helping to mentor out here in Colorado. So we were doing hundreds of pull-ups, weighted pull-ups, thousands of sit-ups and push-ups. So a lot of calisthenics, a lot of running, a lot of swimming. I joke around. I'm like, look, for my guys, I'm like, you don't need to pick up weights. if you want to do some shoulder stuff, for log PT, get those shoulders, those deltoids, really, really strong. That's great. High reps with low weight, is my preference. But I'm like, there's no bench press contests in buds,
Mhm.
right? So the guys, and sorry to say this, Bruce, but the guys who get to buds who quit sometimes first, like the guys who end up getting washed out first, are a lot of the football players, because they're beefed up and they're huge, and the instructors call them meat sticks, like they're just they're big guys, and they're strong, but that's all the more weight that you have to push up and pull up
Wow.
and run and everything else. And so there is a lot of preparation that is required for buds. But with that being said, buds is designed, and bud stands for basic underwater demolition seal. So that's the school that we go through. It's 6 months divided into 3 phases. And buds is designed to be able to break your body down,
Mm.
right? So no matter how prepared you are, how physically fit you are, your body's going to break down at some point, and it's going to quit. And that's when the instructors want to see if you've got what it takes between your two ears to really mentally persevere and push through the adversity that you're going through. So that's my long answer to your question, but preparation is huge for buds, and that's why I'm in the role that I am right now. I'm a SEAL motivator at the Air Force Academy, so I show up there a couple times a month, and all the guys that want to do a lateral transfer, all the cadets that want to do a lateral transfer from the Air Force into the Navy and go to buds, that's where I come in. I help mentor these guys and train them and talk about the mental, the emotional, the physical, and even the spiritual aspects of that training, and what it means to be an elite warrior. A lot of people don't really realize what all that it requires and demands of you.
I love hearing those stories just because I've always put myself in a position of like, man, I love working out. I love hard workouts. I love getting it in while I was playing, but even so now. So I
That's
always think about that. I'm like, could I get through Bud's training? And especially, could I get through Hell Week? And
yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I think I can, but at the end of the day, it's like you talked about the swimming stuff. And I'm interested to hear a few stories of how guys drop out. Like, what's probably the first activity, or is it a weekend guys are dropping out? Is it, I don't want to say easy, but is it, doable to last a month into it where it's not truly trying to get you to tap out, or they try to make guys tap out fast?
Yeah, it's day one, week one. The hammer's coming down, and they don't let up. So it's my buds class 253. We started with 223 guys, and we finished with 21. And,
Wow.
and first phase is generally the first 2 months. That's generally where the majority of the attrition rate happens. During Hell Week, you mentioned Hell Week. So Hell Week generally falls right smack dab in the middle of first phase. So it's around week 4, week 5 of first phase. That's where about 40% of the attrition rate happens, is right there in Hell Week. And that's where we go for 5.5 days with a total of 2 hours of sleep. They give us 1 hour sleep on a Wednesday morning, 1 hour sleep on a Thursday morning. So I would say, though, in general, the one evolution that really gets guys to quit, I mean, it's the cold water.
Mhm.
Cold water. Everyone hates the cold water, right? I mean, like, I don't care how many plunges that you take every day, or how many cold showers you take. Like, every time you get in cold water, it sucks.
Mm.
So the cold water is really what gets a lot of guys. The one evolution that gets a lot of guys too is drown proofing, and that's where they tie our hands behind our back, and they tie our ankles together, and we have to survive basically in a pool for quite a while. We have to bob up and down for about 10 minutes, and then we have to float for 10 minutes, still being bound, and then we have to traverse 100 meters being bound. So that's that it's that panic
Yeah.
mentality.
See,
That panic gets a lot of
and,
guys.
and that's where I'd be like, ooh, this water stuff. And you're a swimmer. So that stuff, did that, I mean, even though you're tied up, since your background was swimming, was that, I don't, I never want to call any of this stuff easy, but was that one of your strengths where you're like, okay, this isn't going to be a bad exercise for me. I got this. Let me help motivate my team and help encourage them.
Yeah, it definitely helped motivate them. Definitely helped encourage them. I wouldn't say that it was easy, but it was something that didn't didn't trigger that panic inside of me. So I was able to stay cool, calm, and collected while still holding my breath underwater. It did take some preparation. It was extremely difficult. Now, what I will say is this: there's three evolutions that we have to pass every single week. If you fail them three times, you're kicked out.
Mm.
And so the first one is a 4 mile run in boots and pants in soft sand, and the times differ between first phase, second phase, third phase. They get faster and faster. The second one is the O course. We call it the grown man's playground. It's a lot of fun. And then the third one is that 2 mile open ocean swim. So
Wow.
that was one of the evolutions though, Bruce, where I'm like, wait, you're gonna give us fins? Like, oh, it's game on. Like I didn't have fins growing up, in competitive swimming as much as I wish I did. So that was more of my happy place. I was just kind of on autopilot for that 2 miles every week. So that was kind of a good
Man.
mental break for me during this one. But a lot of guys do struggle with the combat side stroke, and if you don't know how to guide in the ocean, right? It's different. It's a lot different swimming in the ocean than it is swimming in a pool, right? Because you got goggles, you can see the lane, you can see the lane lines, the line underneath it, so you can know where you're at. But in the ocean, you have to learn how to guide,
Mm.
or you're swimming like this, and you've just doubled or tripled your time because
Oh,
you're basically swimming a lot longer than 2 miles. So
that's what I was just thinking. I swam in I did like a sprint triathlon, and I'm telling you, Phil, this was like I think it was a 200-meter swim, like a 5 mile bike and a mile run. So I mean, it's cake to you, right? So I'm thinking I'm gonna crush this thing. Well, I
yeah,
get in the water first to swim, and I'm swimming as fast and as hard as I can. And my buddy behind me like starts to do like a back float, and I thought he was kind of talking some crap to me, but I
yep.
realized he was actually struggling. So
Oh
then
wow,
I start laughing because I see how actually tough it is. I thought I was going to kill this swim. It's only going to take about 10 minutes or so, and I was dead. And all I did was like 10 minutes of it. Now I do enjoy going out swimming. I've never been, I'm a good swimmer, not as far as being on a swim team or swimming a ton of laps, but I go do swim laps because I love the exercise
oh, yeah, yeah,
and a different way to do it. But I couldn't imagine, because like you just said, if you don't have a lane and goggles, like that 2 miles can turn into four, or, depending.
right.
So I keep going back though to the one where your hands and feet are tied, because that's one that kind of scares me, like in the water as well. Is there like, when they're watching you, how quickly are they to jump in and grab a guy if they see him struggling, or they let him go for a good amount of time to try to figure it out?
Yeah, every guy at some point during those evolutions struggles. We've got underwater knot tying. We've got the 50-meter underwater breath hold. We've got a lot of evolutions in buds where it requires underwater work, and so they'll let you struggle for a little bit. But they know though when a guy they what the instructors say, when a guy goes when a guy goes tits up, they're like, okay, this is when we're grabbing them, we're pulling them to the side, we're resuscitating them. So they have a lot of instructors
Wow.
that are right there on top of us, observing everything that we're doing. So it's generally very very safe.
Man, that's
And by
nuts.
the
Now,
way, like, once they resuscitate the guy, it's not like, okay, you passed, because you were willing to go to that extreme, right, to pass out underwater. No, they're like, okay, you're resuscitated, you good, fit for full duty, get back in there and do it. So
oh man,
yeah, yeah,
just the mental toughness though that it takes. Like you could go in, like you just said, football players, we're in shape. You look the part, big, thick, muscular. But even football players, even like the mental toughness it takes to persevere anything. I mean, just talk about your mindset through that period, and just, as you grew up, like when did you really know though you were built differently here? Because I feel like you can train, you could get in shape, but there's a difference between a guy that has it here and, more importantly, in his heart, his will,
yep, yep.
and someone else. Like, when did you know you were different? Because sometimes I feed off of, like, I say, I'd struggle in some of those exercises you're talking about, but I sometimes feed off of seeing someone else struggle. Like, ooh,
Sure,
like that pushes me and motivates me to go harder
it
and
does. Yeah.
achieve that.
Yeah. Every time I heard that bell ring 3 times and they would DOR, drop on request, that, like you, that motivated me. I'm like, "All right, I made it past one other guy," you know? So, I would say buds is at least 70, if not 80% mental. You know, to my point earlier, it's designed to be able to break your body down. So, you know, was ever like a light bulb moment growing up where I realized, hey, you know what? I just got this mental toughness that not a lot of people have. I never had that,
Mhm.
Bruce. I think it's something that's developed. I don't think like one day it just clicks and all of a sudden it's like, damn, like I'm really mentally tough right now. You know, it's a progression. It's learning after trial and error of pushing through and the grit. So, for example, swimming, I would push my body so hard in swim practice at times. My body would actually throw up. I'm pushing myself so
Mhm.
hard I throw up. Well, I didn't want to spit that out in the pool because that's super gross and not respectful, right, of your other teammates. So I would hold it in my mouth as I'm swimming hard, hard, hard. I'd hold that. It sounds gross, man, but it's kind of cool though, right? So I'd hold that throw up, dude, in my mouth, and then I got to the end of the lane. Instead of doing a flip turn, I just spit all that out in the gutter, do an open flip turn, and just keep going. You know, so it was the days and the weeks and the months and the years of developing that perseverance, developing that grit, that mental toughness that I think really helped prepare me to get to buds. And bro, I'll tell you, I mean, there were times in training where I was the most miserable I've ever been. And not to sound cliche at all, but I did not even give myself the option to quit. When I
Mhm.
went into buds, I'm like, I'm not cracking that door. Like if it gets too bad, if it gets to this point, if I'm
Mhm.
this cold, if I'm this miserable, then I might know. I was like, I would rather die than quit.
Wow.
And, you know, I'm a man of faith, right? So for me, I'm like, well, if I die, I meet my Lord and Savior, and if not, I become a Navy SEAL, right? So for me, it was a win-win at that point. I'm like, I can't lose with this equation, you know. So it was again, not to sound cliche, man, but it really was that mental grit and fortitude and that mental toughness really was developed through a lot of difficult experiences in my life, both physical experiences like in swimming and, you know, relational experiences, family stuff that I
Mhm.
had to go through. I mean, I didn't have the easiest upbringing, you know, as a child, and so it was a lot of that I think helped kind of form me to who I
Mhm.
was. So that at the pinnacle of that buds training, I had what it took to be able to get through.
Well, and I love hearing you say that too about just mental toughness. Like that it's not just something you wake up one day and you have it. It's something you can build. And I listen a lot and I show our team a lot of times Kobe Bryant videos because he talks about how failure doesn't exist. And as I kind of look back at my career and I've always like because I'll help young kids, I'll try to mentor, young football players, but also adults as well, and on and off the field. But I look at my career and I'm like what was it? And even for my kids growing up that are still young, it's like it's those moments that are uncomfortable that you grow from because it's not easy and you learn from it and you understand how to get past it.
That's
So
right.
go ahead. I'm glad you said that though about how you can build that because it's encouraging to people out there that are listening. Like if you're not where you want to be right now, and I don't think any of us are. Like people can look at me and be like, "Man, you played over a decade in the league," but I'm never satisfied. I always feel like me personally, there's still room to grow. I still want to grow.
100%. And I like what you said about Kobe. Love Kobe, and I agree with failure doesn't exist. But for our listeners, let me make a very powerful distinction between failing and failure,
Mm,
just real quick. Okay. So again, little rabbit trail we're going down, because if someone thinks failure is equal to failing, then what Kobe said is wrong because everyone fails. So when they fail and they're like, "Oh crap, Kobe said, you know, failure doesn't exist and I just failed miserably here, then I must be, you know, a failure. I must not have what it takes."
mhm,
So failing, making mistakes, that's fine. Like everybody makes mistakes, you know, and that produces a healthy amount of guilt, right? It's like, okay, I messed up. I'm going to pay the man. I'm going to learn my lesson. I'm going to take ownership. So important, right? Leaders, four most important words a leader can say is, I messed that up. So
Mm,
taking ownership of our mistakes, but here's this powerful yet very subtle distinction, not letting that get into our psyche and not letting that shame really start to erode and attack our identities. Because if we crack that door to shame and we invite shame in, that's when we start to view ourselves as a failure. That's
mm.
when we start to view ourselves as not measuring up or never going to fill in the blank. Right. So I agree with Kobe. Failure
That's
doesn't
good.
exist, but it's very important that we frame that in a healthy and realistic way of, we're all going to make mistakes, but in that moment, in that crucial moment, what are you going to choose to do? Are you going to wallow in self-pity, beat yourself up, and then quit? Or are you going to pick yourself back up, take ownership, and
Mm.
learn from that? And that's where I agree with Kobe, that failure really doesn't exist, ideally, because we're all learning from the mistakes that we
Oh,
make.
absolutely. And that's what he says through this video is, failing doesn't exist if you've learned something through
Yes.
that exercise or that event. But I love
Yeah.
what you said too about the best thing a leader can say. Say that again. The best thing a leader can say is, I
Four most
messed up.
important words. Yep. Four most important words. I screwed that up.
Oh, that
Yep.
and I see it all the time with football. You won't believe if a guy makes a mistake,
Oh yeah.
especially quarterback position. Like, you take accountability, you watch how much the guys beside you will have your back and be
Yep.
like, that is my guy. Especially, and I was big on this as a player. Like, if I made a throw and yeah, maybe the receiver could have caught it. Hey, my bad. I got to get you a better ball.
Yep.
Or you're in a meeting room and coach is saying something about a wideout. I'd say, hey, coach, that was my fault. I told him the wrong thing. That
Right.
that player is like, you're my guy. I got you.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of finger pointing out there in this world
mm,
today, a lot of blaming. And like, to your point, man, like, you're a quarterback and all of a sudden your O-line, one of the guys on your O-line, he goes right instead of left, or he's not blocking well enough and you get sacked, and in the process, you throw that ball and it's an interception. Well, you know what? Instead of owning it, right? But like, hey, I should have just held on to the ball. It's like, dude, why? It was your fault, right? Like,
mm.
you should have been blocking better. So yeah, we could talk about this all day long, but yeah, I mean, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's very, very important for leaders to be able to take ownership of the mistakes that we make, because it humanizes the leader, it humanizes the person, it humanizes the quarterback, and you want to be able to follow a guy that has the balls to be
Mm.
able to say, you know what, I screwed it up, man, and I'm not perfect, and I need some help at times.
No, for sure. I want to go to back to Buds. I'm obsessed with just the whole process of it all. But you were correct me if I'm wrong. This was the time too. You were going through a um, personal adversity within your family while you were in training.
Yeah, yeah. So my wife Danielle, she was let's see, I just finished first phase of buds, and she was having a hard time kind of getting out of bed and moving around, and we're like, what in the world's going on? And so we had a random weekend off of training. So we went to Balboa Hospital there on the West Coast, because that's where Buds is in Coronado, California.
Hmm.
So we went to Balboa Hospital there in San Diego, and she underwent a lumpectomy. And at the age of 28 years old, Bruce, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Wow.
It had metastasized to her sternum, was in 26 of her lymph nodes from her waist up. And dude, I'll tell you what, everything in my world crumbled in an
Mm.
instant. And when we got that diagnosis, all of our hopes and dreams of having kids and family, like, everything just came crashing in on us. And so, yeah, man, we talked a little bit about this before the segment here, but I mean, I look back on that time, and not only did I go through what I believe is the world's hardest military training, but I mean, I went through that with a wife who was fighting for her life,
Mm.
and she fought it for 4 hard, long years, and ended up passing away the day before Valentine's Day on February 13th of 2008. So I just
Wow.
celebrated her 16th year. To, celebrated the death of her for 16 years now. So
Wow. No,
a
man,
couple days.
I'm sorry to hear that. I know we were talking about it, and I always think of like our mindset, our mentality. I had a buddy on that got diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was able to find a way to overcome that, you know, and there's other stories out there like your wife that unfortunately pass away from it. And, you know, the mindset though that it takes for the person going through that, but also the loved ones that are involved in that. And with you're trying to balance, you know, work, you know, you have a drive, a vision of what you want to do and be, but then at the same time is caring for your wife, making she's good, all the appointments, all the things she's going to have to go through. I mean, how difficult was that, knowing like what Monday rolls around, you got to go back to work?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, honestly, it was impossible for me. I did a pretty good job of compartmentalizing. You know, like okay, this is work and this is the
Mhm.
family. This is what my wife Danielle needs right now. This is what I have to do, and the level of concentration that I need to bring to training. It was it was hard. It was really hard. I mean, I had some days where I was completely just sidetracked, you know, distracted while I was in training because I was thinking about her
Mm.
and her chemo and her radiation appointments and different things like that as well too. So I tried my best to straddle both worlds the best that I could, but um, yeah, man, it was hard.
Mm.
It was brutal.
That's insane. I want to ask you one more question about Buzz, and then I want to get into, you know, you public speaking, you know, an executive business coach, and kind of the different presentations you give. But first, like, is there a story during training where, you know, and I think this was in your book where they try to get you guys to give up? Like, is there a point where they try to entice you, like, oh, if you know, if you stop, I got this for you?
Yeah, all the time on the daily. Yeah. Yeah, so it was one of my funny stories. So this was day 2 of Hell Week. And this was before so the human body starts to hallucinate due to sleep deprivation. I mean, it is fascinating to see what the human body will do. We were so just another little sidetrack. So for me, one of the funny stories that I do remember, this was around the world tour. So this was in the middle of Hell Week. It's the longest evolution that we have in Hell Week. It's 2.5 days where we have to travel 81 miles around the San Diego Bay Area, paddling in our boats
Wow.
and running with them on our heads.
Wow.
And I must have been super tired, man. I was definitely sleep deprived because I'm rowing, right? And you'd see like guys like they're falling asleep while they're rowing, and they'd fall into the ocean, you know, and they wake up and they crawl back in their boat. It's pretty comical. But I was rowing once and I looked over, man, and I swear I must have been super hungry because I looked over and I saw thousands of Snickers bars floating in the ocean. And, I mean, like I like Snickers, dude. I don't know why it was Snickers, but it was like, and I think that'd make a great Snickers commercial, by the way, right? But I'm like,
For sure.
I look over, dude. I'm like, how did they get all these Snickers bars in the ocean? Like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, you know? And I was like trying to reach out and grab them, you know, because I was super hungry. It was so funny. But the story though that I mentioned in my book, this was day 2 of Hell Week, and we were getting surf tortured. So another one of those just evolutions where the waves are crashing over you. Guys are, you know, getting water all over them in their mouth, in their nose. Sign is like everything. They're coughing and gagging, and we're getting hypothermia. You know,
Mm.
so it wouldn't be uncommon to see a white pickup truck. We call it the ambu or the ambulance, right? So the white pickup truck, and they're stationed near us at all times during every single one of our evolutions. Because if a guy gets hurt, then they throw him in the bed of the truck and they drive him to medical.
Mhm.
So we're getting surf torture. This is around 12 o'clock at night. And I saw the lights of the ambu pull up, and I'm
So the surf torture, what you're what laying?
yeah, yeah. So that's where you link arms with your brothers and you're laying in the ocean, you know, for an extended period of time. And the instructors have charts of the water, so they take the temperature of the water and they know how long the human body can sustain that temperature until it starts breaking down and exhibiting signs of hypothermia. And that's
Wow.
when they'll keep you in the water a good 2 to 3 minutes beyond that point, again, to see if you've got what it takes to really mentally persevere through that adversity that we're going through. So So we're getting surf torture, and I look over, I see the lights of the Ambu pull up. Out of the cab steps instructor Echegaluga. So love the guy, and he's a 6'4" Latino instructor, right? So he's all fired up because he's brand new on his shift that night. So he's all fired up. He grabs the bullhorn and he says, "Niños, the nighttime is the right time." And that was like his coin phrase. The night he was like chanting this, and we're like, "Shut up already." The nighttime is the right time to quit. Right.
Yeah.
So he'd always say that. And I look over and I see steam coming from the bed of the truck. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to hallucinate, right? Like steam from the bed of the truck. Well, I wasn't hallucinating yet. They actually filled up a hot tub and they put it in the bed of the truck.
Oh, wow.
Not only that, they went out and bought 6 dozen fresh Krispy Kreme donuts.
Oh, man. And you haven't eaten since when? Like how many?
Like, dude, in Hell Week, you burn around 15,000 calories a day. I mean, you're just constantly burning calories. Average day in buds, it's around 10,000. I mean, it's a lot, right? So
Wow.
they do feed us, which is good, but they deprive us of sleep and of heat as well too, which is two of the three
Mm.
essential that the human body needs in order to survive. So yeah, we're hungry, and so they bought the donuts, filled up the hot tub, put it in the bed of the truck. Instructor Echegaluga comes over the bullhorn and says, "The first 6 guys to get up and quit and touch this truck can sit in the hot tub as long as they want to, eat a dozen fresh Krispy Kreme donuts." And a bunch of dudes, Bruce, like that, bro, they all got up and sprinted towards the truck. And it's
Wow.
right, right. I mean, it's comical now, but I mean, like I realized at the time, I'm like, holy crap! Like your lifelong dream of becoming a United States Navy SEAL, the best of the best, is basically distilled down to a bath and a donut. You're willing to give
Mhm.
that up for a bath and a donut in this moment because you lack the perspective of the light at the end of the tunnel of what is to come. Like you lost sight of the end goal and you
Wow.
compromised for a bath and a donut. So
Is
yeah, man.
is it
Yeah,
is that that's unbelievable though how you put it too because you lost sight of the end goal. Like because that story is remarkable. That's unbelievable
yeah,
because in that moment, like I can't say I would have toughened it out and stuck in the water. Like I would like to think I would, but you talk about a hot tub, some donuts. I'm starving. I'm cold. I want
right,
some sleep.
right.
Um,
Yep,
but we all can lose sight though of our vision of where we want to go, and we can make the comfortable decision right now that just throws us off our mission. Like so, and that's just I love it because it relates so much to no matter what you're doing, no
yeah.
matter what your
Well,
vision is.
that's right. That's right. And the first thing that came to my mind as we're talking here is land navigation. Okay, so land navigation. I start at point A and I got to get to point B, right? And I got a map. Well, if your compass is just 1 degree off the declination, right? Like, so you have to orient your compass, and that's a whole nother topic. But wherever in the United States that you are, so if your compass is off just 1 degree as you are walking towards that end point, you're going to find yourself missing the mark big time,
Wow.
even if your compass is 1 degree off. So to your point, to our point, of what we're saying is, if you decide to compromise in life, just a little bit, just a tiny little bit, you decide to compromise, and then the next day you compromise just a little bit, and then the next day and the next day, dude, you're going to find yourself going down a road that is going to lead to a lot of disappointment, heartache, and possibly destruction in your life as we compromise our integrity and just by a little bit, and we're gonna miss that end goal. I mean, the Bible says, "Without vision, the people perish." Right? I mean, without that crystal clear vision of where you're going, making sure that you're prepared, making sure your compass is dialed in, then it's going to be really heartbreaking and disappointing in the long run.
Well, thank you for that, Phil, because that is exactly what I'm showing my kids. They're 10, 8, and 6, and I'm showing that. You get off track, boys, shit's over. No.
Right.
But
That's
you're
right.
right. I mean, it's
I got 5 kids too, man. So I'm right there with you. So I got 2 daughters and 3 boys, age range from 11 to 17. And I'm preaching the same thing, man. I am. But I mean, you know
that's
what
cool.
though? More is caught than taught.
Hmm.
Being a dad, our kids are watching us. And so if they're watching us, you can say something all day long, but if your actions aren't matching your words, then that's a big deal.
Mm.
And so if they're watching us compromising every now and then as well too, then we can't expect them to toe the line and to do what we say rather than what we're doing.
Man, that's so good. That's a great reminder. Like, I need that. I needed that because it is like our kids our kids are watching us. They feed off our energy and our actions, and we can be the dad that preaches, you should do this, you should be that. Get off your iPad while we're
Um,
sitting on our phone on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
exactly.
But I want
Yep.
to so you go around you public speaking. I mean, you do an unbelievable job. And talk about the 4 presentations you give. I'm sure there's a ton more, but I was just kind of focusing on those 4. But maybe just talk about what you do around town and in your area, but all over the country, because you were also a chaplain for the University of Cincinnati football. So it's just cool. Your wide range of you're in the Navy SEALs, you're a chaplain. So to tie it all together, man, I love that because you're preaching some scripture to us as well. So
Yep.
it's all good stuff. But just talk about maybe those things.
Yeah. So it's funny. After one of my speaking engagements, I was talking to a guy, and he's like, "Wait a minute, you were a Navy SEAL, and then you went to be a chaplain and a pastor. Like, what? How does that work? He's like, that's like going from a stripper to a nun." Going from the pole to the cross, right? It was funny. It was funny, but I was like, you know what? God just opened the door for me to step into ministry, and He just moved me from the physical fight to the spiritual
Mm.
fight. And I get this spiritual warfare thing on a whole new level because I've stared at the face of evil before, and it can be pretty daunting at times. So yeah, man, I'm traveling around the country every week. Super blessed, man. Just really, really busy doing my thing. But I do have 4 presentations. And the first one is overcoming adversity. I talk about the 5 P's. So I talk about perseverance. I talk about preparation. I talk about positivity. I talk about your pack or who you choose
Mm.
to hang out with. So talk a lot about teamwork in that pack, and then progress, the role that progress plays even in the midst of making mistakes. So stories and all of that. So I've got overcoming adversity, and then I have a pretty unique one, and it's called living free and fearless, and it's a self-defense presentation.
Mm.
I think you and I can agree that our country isn't going in a great direction, and we're just seeing a rise in crime, muggings and rapes, and I mean, it's sickening.
It's
And so I've
insane.
got a self defense presentation. It actually started out as a women's self defense
Mm.
course. And then all the guys are like, wait a minute, like we want to know this stuff too. So I talk about situational awareness. I
Mm.
talk about what do you find, like how do you protect yourself in everyday scenarios that you find yourself in? And then we talk about engaging the threat, how to strike, where to strike, how to use your cell phone as a weapon, how to get out of chokeholds, other alternatives that you can use. So really cool, really fun, fascinating, very interactive. People are standing up and practicing, and it's high energy. It's a lot of fun. And then my third one is three-dimensional leadership. So 3 dimensions are leading in, out, and up. So how
Mm.
do you lead yourself well? First and foremost, if you want to be a leader, you look behind and no one's following you. Well, there's a reason. It's probably because you're not leading yourself well. Before we hope to lead anyone else, we have to first learn how to lead ourselves well. So
Mm.
leading yourself well, leading well within a team of colleagues, and then how do you lead well for those who report to you and those who you report to? So that's three-dimensional leadership. And then my last one is being prepared for the unknown. And I talk about, as SEALs, I talk about our training, the tools that we use, and our target. And then I relate that to the audience. What is their training tools and target, and have handouts and stuff for that one as well too. So all 4 of them have videos, have stories, personal stories, stories of our training, that sort of thing. And I bring all my not all my gear. I bring a very small fraction of my gear out to my events too, so people can see my helmet, pick up my body armor, look at
That's
what
sweet.
what rounds will stop what kind of body armor that we have, and my H gear, and just all that kind of fun, like really cool stuff. So I pass that around and show people, and the 3 lines of gear that I used in the SEAL team. So yeah, man, it's fun. It's
That's
a lot
cool.
of fun to do what I get to do. You know what though, Bruce? I'm sure there are some times in practice and some times on the field where you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're like, oh man, like life sucks. Like this isn't fun. And then you're like, hold on a second. Like
Yep.
I have a very blessed life, like I'm making good money. I get to go out and try to instill just a lot of not just motivation, but what wakes me up every
Mm.
day, Bruce, is truly wanting to be authentic and make a positive, lasting impact in the lives of everyone that I'm talking to. So, just the ability to be able to get in front of thousands of people every year and travel to different cities and get to do what I do, man. It's a great job.
Well, you're doing that, brother. I mean, just the time we've spent together and so many good nuggets because it's so true the stuff you speak on. And now, where can people find you? Your website, philkoontz.com.
Yep.
Um, how can they get a hold of you, get in touch? I mean, you offer a lot of good things, and you're an executive business coach as well. So, public speaker, coach. You're a busy man over there with the 5 kids as well.
Yeah, I am. And as if that wasn't enough, I'm also the owner of Karambit Tactical Knives. So Karambit is a style of knife, and it was my tertiary weapon in the SEAL teams. I was first introduced to a karambit, and I've got my karambit right here. So, what makes it unique is the hawkbill shape of the blade. So
Oh,
this was
that's
my
cool.
yeah, this is my tertiary weapon in the SEAL teams. So, long story short, I've been speaking for 9 years now, and like I said, I'm bringing out my gear and talking about my gear, and so I've got guys, men and women, coming up to me like, hey, that's a really cool knife, Phil. Like, where can I get one of those? Like, definitely need to add that to my repertoire. And so light bulb goes off, the entrepreneur in me, and I'm like, I should just like buy 20 of these at a time and start selling them at my
Yeah.
gig, right? Like, makes sense, right? Like a little side hustle.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this for 5 years, and then in August of 2020, the owner of Karambit Tactical Knives calls me up, and he's like, "Hey, Phil, you've been a really loyal customer. I know what your background is with the Karambit. Just wanted you to know I'm selling the company. What do you think?"
Wow.
So I thought about it, Bruce, for like a half a second, man, and I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" Right? So threw my name in the hat and ended up getting the company. So my business partner William Simpkins, he's a financial advisor in the Ashburn, Virginia area, and together we kind of co-own Karambit Tactical Knives.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, so I got the knife company, and that's just karambit.com. So it's Karambit, karambit.com. And then how people can find me, yeah, philkoontz.com. I've got like a contact page on there where people can reach out to me for speaking gigs or executive business coaches. And I'm a part of a team as well too of some really high functioning guys, both SEALs and former military as well too. And we're speakers, we're executive business coaches, and so we're kind of collaborating and combining all of our skill sets to be able to really go to some big companies, big industries, and really help them. Teach them what is leadership all about nowadays. I mean, I don't know about you, man, but I mean, as I survey the field and I look at, on the horizon of just the West, just the United States, good leaders, man, are few and far between
Mm.
nowadays. They really are. And so I know, leadership used to be kind of like this big buzzword, but there's a lot there's a lot of misconceptions with what good leadership is. So,
Well,
but with yeah,
I
it's
was gonna say, leave us with that. Like, leave us some key points of leadership because I love that. I love talking about leadership, but because I'm trying to grow as a better leader each and every day. So, what would you or say some of the key things to be a good leader?
yeah. So the first one that comes to my mind is going to seem a little counterintuitive, and that is you got to take care of yourself well.
Mm.
You got to make sure that you're what I call filling your own bucket, right? You got to do something at least 30 minutes, if not like an hour every day where you're re-energizing yourself, you're recharging your batteries, because oftentimes as leaders, we're constantly giving out, making sure everybody else is squared away. Everybody else has what they need. That bucket mentality. We're scooping out the water, giving it to other people throughout the day until we're running on fumes. And that's where burnout happens, man.
Mm.
That's where midlife crises happens. Like, you just get to the point where you're so exhausted and you're like this rat on, this mouse on the wheel, all the time. You don't know how to get off. So if you're not prioritizing yourself well, then you can't give other people really the most and the best of what you have to be able to give. So you got to learn how to prioritize yourself, and scheduling that, putting that in your calendar is huge. We already talked about the second one I was thinking of, and that is owning your own mistakes.
Mm.
How do you leverage your mistakes to become a better version of yourself? And then the other one is be authentic. Like, don't be one person on the field as you are, like in the locker room as you are with your family or your friends when you're out celebrating and stuff. So just be very authentic, be the same person, really know who you are, your identity, right? Here's a big one, dude. And I am sure that the NFL players that get out, that they struggle with the same thing that us as military service members struggle with. And that is, you are not what you do.
Mm.
I'll say that again because it's
So
so
good.
powerful. You are not what you do. So knowing your identity and who you are at the core of who you are is so essential to living a life as a leader, a holistic life as a leader, a healthy life as a leader. You gotta have a strong identity and knowing who you are. Because if you're not an NFL player anymore, you're not a Navy SEAL anymore, you fill in the blank. What something happens, you become terminally ill, or you wreck your body, or you lose a spouse or a child, or God forbid something happens, and if you have your identity wrapped up in who you in like what you do, and that's who you are, then all of a sudden your midlife crisis, all of a sudden you're at an identity crisis, and you're really stuck in between a rock and a hard place, and you can go down that very dark hole and self-medicate, with alcohol or medication or substance abuse or pornography or over shopping, overeating, whatever that might be. You try to numb the pain because you don't know how to get yourself out of the world of hurt that you found yourself in.
Those are great points. Those are great keys, and especially that last one. I love it because I've experienced it, and you probably lived it too, and that's why you're preaching on it. Is sometimes we wrap ourselves up. This is who I am. No, that's what you did. That's not who you are. And so much good stuff. And I love the accountability piece. I see that so much. We touched on it earlier, but that just hits the nail right on the head about taking accountability, and then going back to your number one point about taking care of yourself first as a leader. And I think of my wife, right? She's running around crazy with our kids, 3 kids, 10, 8, and 6. She packs their lunches, takes them to school, does the homework with them, like cooks dinner. She is nonstop, laundry, cleaning, everything. And does she, though, give herself what she needs to replenish that energy to be the best she can be? Like, and I go through my life as well. What do I need to replenish so I can be the best version of myself to help others? So many good points.
Yep. Dude, if we're not doing that, then we're yelling at our kids more. Our fuses are a lot shorter. We're arguing more with our spouses. Everyone's getting our leftovers, and especially the ones that deserve our best, are getting our leftovers at the end of the day. So it's not necessarily putting yourself first, like all the time, 100% no, right? You got to make sure people are taken care of, but we have to prioritize ourselves. So.
That's so good. Well, I know, I'm going to take one time. We're going to meet up, and I'm going to have you just kick my butt in a
Let's do it.
workout. Like, I want Navy SEAL 101.
Yep.
I don't want to drown, but let's make this thing hard.
I'll resuscitate you if you drown. All right. So
And then you'll be like, Bruce, get back in there. You're good.
Hey man, all you have to do is hire me, man, to come out, and I'll run the whole like UFL, right? I'll run those guys through a little mini boot camp, and I'll square them away.
I love it, brother. We're gonna talk for sure, but I appreciate you taking all the time today, man. So many good stories and nuggets on leadership, mental toughness, overcoming obstacles. So I appreciate your time, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. God bless you, man. Thanks for having me on the show, bro. It's been a great time.
All right, brother. Have a good one.
You
The
too.
Alpha 5 Method podcast is about hearing your story. I want to hear from individuals that have overcame adversity. I want to hear their path and what has helped them achieve greatness. Go to my website now, alpha5method.com, and join the pack. Hey, I'm Bruce Gradkowski, founder of the Alpha 5 Method. Look for the Alpha 5 Method podcast wherever you stream your podcast.